All right, we're going to connect two things that sound like they have absolutely nothing in common. The giant, mind-boggling world of government debt and the much more personal challenge of, actually saving for your own retirement.
Yeah, I know. It sounds a little weird, right? I mean, you've got trillions of dollars in national debt over here and your 401k over there. But what if I told you the best way to handle both of them actually comes from the very same playbook?
So, first things first, let's zoom all the way out and talk about a nation's debt. We're going to dive into this core dilemma that basically every single government has to deal with.
Okay, so when you want to check on a country's financial health, economists have this one go-to number, the debt-to-GDP ratio. It's really just a way of comparing how much a country owes to how much it produces every year. It's GDP. You can almost think of it as like a credit score for an entire nation. And our first source paper calls it the key indicator for figuring out if that debt is even sustainable.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because every government is constantly walking this tightrope. On one hand, they could choose austerity. That's when they run a surplus to pay down debt. The problem, as the research points out, that can cause, well, citizens' discontent. On the other hand, they can go for stimulus, running a deficit to juice the economy. That makes for citizens' content, sure, but it also means piling on even more debt.
So, how in the world is a government supposed to balance all that? Especially when you have no idea what's coming next. A huge recession or a massive economic boom. What's the right move?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And it brings us to what the optimal strategy actually is. Our first source paper digs right into this, using a pretty complex economic model to figure out the best possible path.
Now, the researchers are using some super heavy-duty math here. We're talking stuff called stochastic control and Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equations. But don't worry, you don't need a PhD to get the main idea. All this fancy math is really just a tool for one thing: finding the best strategy when the world is, completely unpredictable and random. And what they found is surprisingly simple. The model's answer isn't some super complicated, detailed plan. Nope. It just identifies one single critical number, a threshold for that debt-to-GDP ratio. It's basically a line in the sand. And the best thing to do completely changes depending on which side of that line you're on.
Think of it like a thermostat for the economy. If the debt gets too hot, if it climbs above that threshold, the model says, slam on the brakes, go for maximum austerity to cool things down. But if the debt is safely below that line, the best move is to floor it, hit the gas with maximum stimulus and let the economy grow. It's a simple, on or off, adaptive kind of strategy.
Okay, so keep that thermostat idea in your head for a second. We're going to switch gears now. Let's zoom way in, from the entire national economy down to your personal finances, because you're about to see how a very similar logic shows up in your retirement plan.
So a ton of people have something called a target date fund in their 401k. The idea is super simple. You just pick the fund with the year you think you'll retire, like the 2050 fund, and it handles all the investment decisions for you. It's set it and forget it. The magic behind these funds is something called the glide path. Here's how it works. When you're young, with tons of time before retirement, the fund goes pretty aggressive, loading up on things like stocks. But as you get older and closer to that retirement date, it automatically starts shifting your money, gliding it over to safer stuff like bonds. The whole point is to lock in your gains. And that seems totally sensible, right? Take big risks when you're young, be careful when you're old. Makes perfect sense. But our second source paper asks a really critical question. Is this glide path thing really the best way to save for retirement? Is it truly the optimal strategy? So, what did they find out? Let's check out what a detailed financial model says is the absolute best way to save.
And the answer from the model is a big, clear yes. The glide path strategy, it's pretty much on the money. It is an optimal strategy. But here's the kicker. The most interesting part isn't that it works, it's why it works.
So you see that classic shift right here. When you're 30, you're heavy on stocks. By the time you're 65, you're mostly in bonds. It's this smooth, gradual move away from risk. So what's the one thing, the main reason this is the smartest way to do it?
And here's the answer straight from the research. The model found that the number one reason the glide path is optimal isn't your age. It's not how much money you have or how crazy the market is. It's your future paychecks. That's it, your stream of future contributions.
Okay, let's unpack that, because it's a huge idea. When you're young, your single biggest asset isn't what's in your bank account. It's what economists call your human capital. Basically, all the paychecks you're still going to earn for the rest of your career. That future income is like this massive, reliable safety net. And because you have that safety net, it's actually optimal for you to take on more risk with your investments. But as you get older, that safety net of future paychecks gets smaller and smaller. So to balance things out, the best strategy is to take less risk in your portfolio. And that is the glide path.
All right, let's tie this all together now, because this is the big idea. You've got two problems that seem totally different: a whole country managing its debt, and you managing your retirement. But it turns out the solution for both shares the same basic logic.
So, back to our original question. What do government debt and your 401k have in common? Well, they're both long-term games filled with total uncertainty. And for both, the best answer isn't some fixed, rigid plan. It's a plan that adapts. For the government, it's that thermostat policy that flips on and off based on a debt threshold. And for you, it's the glide path, which adapts as your safety net of future income gets smaller over time.
So these models, they give us a really clear, logical roadmap. For a country, it's the thermostat. For you and me, it's the glide path. Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. If the math can show us the optimal way forward for these huge, complicated financial challenges, why is it still so incredibly difficult for both governments and individuals to just stick to the plan and avoid a crisis?